fact, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by advertisement in the Cape May Star and Wave on the Township website and posted on the bulletin boards of Township Hall. We request anyone wishing to address council, please wait for the mayor to recognize you. Please state your name and address for the record, and please remember, all comments must be kept to 3 minutes or less.
Thank you. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance, a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Conrad.
Here.
Councilmember Coombs.
Here.
Councilmember Roy.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Perry.
Here.
Mayor Sipper.
Here. Okay, the first item on the agenda is a presentation by Lomax Consultant Group. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Director Lenny Desiderio from the county for allowing Pete to come out to give his presentation to Lower Township. So I want to thank the county for that. I'll ask anybody has any questions for Mr. Lomax. Wait for the presentation to be over, and we'll entertain any question you have. We'll bring a microphone to you in the audience. You can ask Mr. Lomax, like I said, any question you have in the presentation. Pete, the floor is yours.
Mayor, thank you very much. Members of council, good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. I'd also like to recognize your professional staff who was really helpful in making sure that we're able to come today and have all of the necessary meeting materials available up on the television screen, and really just super helpful and communicative. That's always a real pleasure when we see county and municipalities work well together seamlessly to address important issues like this. I would also like to acknowledge Assistant County Administrator Ron Simone, who's here as well. Ron's been pivotal in making sure that resources were brought to bear by the county on behalf of the municipalities to understand this rule proposal, which is over 1,000 pages. It's voluminous, to say the least. And it's an important piece of regulation that I think the county, the municipalities, but also residents, people who live and work in the coastal zone and rely on the coastal zone for their livelihood need to be aware of this regulation. So what I thought I would do is go through a quick background, a bit of an overview of the regulation. I'll get into maybe two of the more sensationalized pieces of the regulation, which I think most folks are concerned about. But I'll spend enough time to go through what those are, and then leave enough available time, as you said, to be able to field questions. As I said, there are 1,057 pages of this rule. And this is unique in the sense that it updates other rules. It's not itself, its own separate set of standards, but it basically infuses those standards into other existing pieces of regulation. So just a little bit of background. In January of 2020, the governor passed Executive Order 100, which instructed DEP to adopt standards for protecting against climate threats, the acronym PACT, P-A-C-T. And as a part of that, DEP has gone through a process of evaluating its regulations, evaluating existing technical and climate science, predicted climate science information, to go through a process to arrive at this rule proposal, which is the Resilient Environments and Landscapes Rule, so acronym REAL. So if you hear me refer to REAL, or if you see REAL in the presentation materials, that stands for Resilient Environments and Landscapes. And the intent is to adopt regulations that will begin to adapt how we live, work, have means of transportation in the coastal zone with the ongoing threat of sea level rise and climate change. With that being said, I'd like to make sure that everyone here is aware that I am not a climate scientist. I'm not here to advocate for or against. I know this is a very hot topic, no pun intended, but one that seems to be bantered about quite a bit in terms of where folks stand on the position of climate change and climate science. I'm an environmental planner by trade for the last 30 years. I've worked and specialized in DEP regulation within the coastal zone of New Jersey. So my role, as instructed by the county, was to go through these rules and understand, excuse me, what changes are proposed and how those changes will be implemented into other rules. So, with that as a little bit of background, excuse me, Eileen, if we could just move on to the next slide. And while we're headed to the next slide, I should also mention it's a little bit unusual to provide comments at this stage of the process. Thank you, that's perfect. Because this is a rule that is not yet officially proposed. It's slated for proposal. The anticipation by DEP was that it would be published in the New Jersey Register in July. That did not happen, and the best information of the moment is that it will happen sometime in early August, perhaps the August 5th edition of the New Jersey Register, where it will be officially proposed, and then a 90-day public comment period will begin. But the background for how we got to this point is that in the governor's instruction to DEP to begin to look at their rules as they applied to sea level rise and climate change, DEP reflected on the work of a science and technical advisory panel that Rutgers University convened. And this panel has met periodically over time. The most recent findings issued by the STAP, the Science and Technology Advisory Panel, from 2019 are presented on the bottom of page 1 of the memorandum that you received, and they're on the screen for the public. And this was a statistical evaluation of the probability of various heights of sea level rise at given planning horizons over time. And what DEP decided was to look at the year 2100, which admittedly is 76 years from now, and they decided that that was an effective planning horizon for regulations because bridges, roads, structures that were built today would conceivably still be serviceable during that period of time. You may have different opinions on that, but they decided to use the year 2100 as a planning horizon for these rules. Just as an aside, that mirrors the precipitation planning horizon, or the predicted precipitation planning horizon that DEP used in its most recent stormwater rule update. So you may recall, or certainly your zoning office and some members of your land use boards will know that DEP changed the stormwater rules, which made stormwater design have to account for greater amounts of precipitation into the future and to design for that, using, again, the year 2100 as a predicted horizon. So back to the Rutgers panel, they looked at what the possibilities of sea level rise would be by year 2100 and concluded that, and this would be in the orange or yellow on the graphic, that in the category of moderate emissions in year 2100, lining up with the 50% chance of 3.3 feet of sea level rise occurring by year 2100. And then dropping down one line to the red row, that there would be a 17% chance of 5.1 feet of sea level rise occurring by year 2100. DEP decided to select the more conservative of those numbers and established a 5-foot sea level rise for these new regulations, and adhering to the year 2100 on the planning horizon. And I explained to you what their rationale was for that, that roads, buildings, infrastructure that was constructed within these next few years to a decade could conceivably still be in service at that time, and therefore needed to be planning for that horizon. They took this 5 feet of sea level rise and they applied it in 2 different ways, and I'm going to get into that here in just a minute. But Eileen, if we could move on to the next slide. Yes, okay. So this would be in the center of page 2 of your memorandum, and it's on the television as diagram 1. This is a composite of two different changes in sea level, where sea level rise impacts 2 different changes. One is that DEP is going to create a new zone of regulation, which is called the inundation risk zone. And this is intended to be the area of predicted permanent standing water due to sea level rise, meaning that an area that is presently dry land based on these year 2100 predictions, anything within 5 feet of the mean higher high water, which is, you know, in NAVD 88 datum is right around 2 feet. It adds 5 feet to that. So it's moving the mean higher high water line to 7 feet. That becomes the inundation risk zone, where DEP believes that area by the year 2100 will be inundated by water on a permanent basis. In addition to that, they've taken that 5 foot predicted sea level rise change, and they've applied that to the flood hazard area mapping. So I think most of us are familiar with the fact that FEMA has mapping for various areas, including Lower Township, where there's the flood insurance risk rate maps, the firms, which establishes a predicted flood hazard area, 100-year flood hazard area, and this would add 5 feet to that. So as an example, if you were in an A zone that currently had an 8-foot flood hazard elevation, after these rules, that flood hazard elevation moves to 13 feet. As you can imagine, that has some pretty significant impacts in terms of the way that structures, roads, houses, commercial facilities, critical care facilities are designed based on what their finished floor elevation is. Because DEP's rules is that you cannot have habitable areas of buildings below the flood zone. In fact, you have to be 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So this would move a flood elevation of 8 to 13, meaning your finished floor elevation would be at 14. Pretty significant change as well. So the scope of these rules, why do we care? What does this apply to? Well, all regulation applies to new development. That's not earth-shattering or eye-opening by any stretch. But these rules also apply to redevelopment. So if you have an existing area that would otherwise be grandfathered from regulatory change, when there is redevelopment that occurs, so the removal of existing structures and the reconstruction on that site, any grandfathering that would exist would be expunged as a part of these rules, and you'd have to meet those new design standards. I think one of the things that might be most concerning to folks, especially folks that are living in the municipality, is that this will also apply to renovations of existing development. So renovation of existing homes or townhomes or commercial businesses where a substantial improvement occurs. And that's an official term, substantial improvement. That means that the cost of renovations to that particular facility exceed 50% of the market value at that time. Given the cost of materials and construction these days, it doesn't take much to become a substantial improvement. So I think it's important to recognize that these rules, where DEP will now regulate activity within 5 feet of the mean higher high water, and extend the flood hazard area limit by an additional 5 feet, and that would apply to new development, redevelopment, and to renovation of existing development. Mary, you talked a little bit about the timeline, and I thought I would just address that quickly. As I said, the proposal date is a bit of a moving target, but we think it's going to be August 5th or early August. That begins a 90-day cycle for public comment. The current proposal had the first public hearing date as July 24th, and the second is July 31st. So we know that at a minimum, 2 of those public hearing dates are going to change, and likely all 3 will. But the current rule proposal has 3 public hearings where DEP will present these rules and be available to take public comment in a virtual format setting. But also, there will be a 90-day official public comment period where anyone can comment on the rules. DEP will, at the end of that public comment period, will receive those comments, and then we'll have to go through the process of addressing each of those before it then takes the next step, which would be to move forward with filing the adoption documents. It's unclear when they would get through that commenting process. My sense is that there will be significant comment on these rules, both for and against, and they'll have to address all of those comments, and it could be until sometime in late '24 by the time they get through that process. But it is their intent to move forward with adoption sometime in '25. They have 1 year from the date of publication to officially adopt the rule. And the other thing that I think is important is that when the rule is adopted, or any of the comments that come in for the rule can't substantially change the rule. So in other words, we're talking 5 feet right now. If the prevailing thought is, well, it should really only be 2 feet, DEP can't make that kind of a substantial change. They can really only make clarifications to the rule as it's proposed, and fix administrative oversights or typos or that sort of thing. They can, as I said, provide clarification. But substantial changes to the proposal would require a reproposal. Eileen, can we move on to the next slide? So this would be, for council, your page 4. So as we get into the inundation risk zone, which I mentioned earlier, this is where we look at the current sea level. And for the public, you can see a diagram which the blue area to the right represents current sea level, and where that sea level meets the land, that's the existing shoreline. And you can see development represented as a home in the landscape. The inundation risk zone would add 5 feet to the mean higher high water. Eileen, if we can move on to the next slide then. So you'll see that the dark blue is the former sea level, and the lighter blue, the top of the lighter blue, becomes the future anticipated sea level as predicted in year 2100. And where that 5 feet of elevation extends out onto the landscape, that creates a new zone. And in that inundation risk zone, there are new regulations that will be required for anyone who's planning to develop in those areas. How that relates to the township and municipalities in Kipmake County, it sort of depends on where you're located. If you're in Woodbine, no sweat. There's absolutely no impact. If you're on the Barrow Island communities, there is a significant impact when you add 5 feet to mean higher high water. And even in the mainland municipalities, such as Lower Township, when you add 5 feet, particularly on your communities along the Delaware Bay and those communities that are adjacent to Fishing Creek and Coxhaw Creek, there are substantial impacts to those areas because of what their current elevation is. But activities in those areas for residential buildings and critical buildings and infrastructure will require a full impact assessment of that proposed development or redevelopment. It will require an on-site alternatives analysis, and then a risk acknowledgement, which is basically a collection of documents that will be forever attached to that property to notify any future purchasers of the level of risk associated with purchasing a property that's designated in that flood zone, inundation zone. Bless you. So I think the takeaway on this is not just that there is a new zone and it increases this impacted land area by 5 feet of elevation, but in addition to that, it takes anticipated development in that area and adds a level of engineering analysis, justification for that development, and also an impact assessment of how development in that landscape would potentially impact other lands around it. Just real quick before I'll jump onto that next slide in just a second. But just to run through the numbers. So on page 5 of your memorandum, there's a table that provides for future anticipated sea levels and what the actual inundated acreage is. So for Lower Township, with the total land area, and I'll speak to the maps behind me in a minute. They're kind of the last slides up, and I'm sure the public will be interested in that. But what we did was we took the total inundation zone and we subtracted out of that any portions of the township that were water areas, right? So we're just looking at land as 17,184 acres with just shy of 7,000 acres of being inundated, which is just over 40% of the township being impacted by that inundation risk zone, okay? Okay, Eileen, thank you for having our next slide up. So now we're moving out of the inundation risk zone and into the climate-adjusted flood elevation, which is abbreviated CAFE. And this is where we take the existing 100-year FEMA-designated flood zone, and we add 5 feet to that. Earlier, I was talking about an area in an 8-foot flood zone would become a 13-foot flood zone. So I'm now on page 7 of the memo, and for the public, this is diagram 4, which shows we all acknowledge that there is a flood zone, an existing flood zone that exists, and folks that are in the flood zone, if they have any kind of financing on the property, typically flood insurance is a foredrawn conclusion and requirement. In addition, even if the property itself isn't financed, but equipment on the property is financed, that can also require the property owner to carry flood insurance if you have leased equipment that is located in that area. So we're familiar with the fact that much of Cape May County is impacted by a flood zone. Excuse me, this would add 5 feet to that, and that's what's indicated on diagram 4. If we can move on to, and you can see diagram 4 is just continuing to add on top of the elevations we looked at. And Eileen, moving on to diagram 5, this is where we add another 5 feet to that, which means, and you'll see the house structure has changed significantly. Now it's on pilings, and that's because the finished floor elevation of habitable facilities in the flood zone must be 1 foot above, the finished floor elevation must be 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So if you add 5 feet, you're increasing the finished floor elevation by that same amount. So this rule is largely intended, and by DEP's own statement, is intended to discourage development in the flood zone, to discourage additional development of barrier islands and low-lying mainland areas. And DEP intends to basically leverage these opportunities to mitigate the future anticipated damage that flooding will have on facilities in these flooded areas. This is particularly important, especially when we get into residential areas where the housing stock is going to be cycled. You know, if you think about a 76-year timeline, most of our housing stock in Cape May County flips at least twice during that period of time. So going back to the numbers on page 8 of the memo, Lower Township with, again, 17,184 acres of land area, currently has 7,253 acres in the flood zone. This will increase to 11,546 acres in the flood zone, with 67% of the township in the flood zone, and that's a change by about 25% of your land mass being pulled into the flood zone. Eileen, can we go on to next? Okay, so On the screen now are basically the maps that are behind me as well. And in your packets, this would be sheet 3. Julia, is that in the back?
No, it's not in their packet.
Okay.
It's in the original packet.
Okay, then let me do this. Okay, so,
Well, actually, I'm sorry.
We have sheet
The
3.
last 2 pages.
Yeah.
okay, you do have sheet 3?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Well, also, the public has this up on the screen. This is just an, well, won't spend much time on this. This is an overview of Cape May County in its entirety of the inundation risk zone. So taking 5 feet of elevation and adding that. So anything in blue is now added to the inundation risk zone. So any areas that are in blue will be the recipient of these new regulations. If we can move on to the next one, which is Lower Township specific. Thank you, Amy. And that, what's up on the screen now is sheet 3, is also here on this panel. And this is taking a much closer look. You'll see Lower Township is bounded by yellow to the north between Lower and Middle, and same thing to the south with the adjacent municipalities, and to the, excuse me, east and west by the red boundary line. Anything that's in blue, and granted, there are significant portions of the township that are in coastal wetlands, which is represented in these blue areas here. What I think is of particular concern are the fingers of blue that reach into the township that extend beyond the Route 9 corridor, or the Route 9 Parkway corridor, and those that are connected to Pond Creek, Coxhaw Creek, and Fishing Creek, and those areas that extend into the township adjacent to existing residential neighborhoods. This becomes the inundation risk zone, again, with those regulations. Next, we're going to move on to what you see in orange here. So again, an overview of the county. What you see in orange are the existing flood hazard areas. And what you see in red is what's added to that with 5 feet of additional elevation. And Eileen, if we can just slide up to the next panel, which is Lower Township focused. Thank you. And for council, to my far right, I guess to your far left, is the same diagram, again, looking at orange being existing flood hazard areas and red being the expanded flood hazard areas in the township. You can see fairly substantial change to the Delaware Bay Shore community. So just some closing comments, and then I'll be happy to take any questions that you have, and certainly any that you want to entertain from the public. I guess the first thing that I would say is that these are 2 pretty sensational changes in terms of areas of impact for regulation. They're anticipated to address climate change and sea level rise based on predicted climate science. It's up for debate as to the accuracy of those calculations. But this rule anticipates in one fell swoop, moving from our baseline, which exists today, to a predicted condition in year 2100 with no interim checks or incremental adjustments over time. I think that's one of the concerns that has been expressed about the rules, is that this is a very broad brush, a broad stroke change in regulation where it's not really tied to any interim benchmarks. We're just basically moving the needle to a predicted condition in year 2100. Climate scientists can debate the accuracy of that, but I think the concern is at a regulatory level where we have housing stock or development that will go through multiple cycles during that 76-year period, and whether there is the opportunity to take a slightly more gradual or incremental approach to these changes in regulation so that one can anticipate and build to an achievable standard, as opposed to taking a future condition, leveraging a short-term investment to achieve that in the near term. So the county has asked me to go through the regulations. What I've described to you is really a small portion of the 1,000 pages. There are a number of other changes to other types of regulations, but most of them tie back to climate change. These are the two most significant and ones that you asked me to come here and speak about today. So I know that there is an active interest at this point in trying to provide some input into the rulemaking process and also to inject some concerns about the specific economic impacts to some portions of the coastal zone, particularly Cape May County, where this rule has a disproportionate impact as it does to other portions of the state. DEP sees this as I think, as a change of 1.5% of the state's land mass being impacted, but in Cape May County, it's significantly more than 1.5%, and one that warrants attention, evaluation, and some comments so that municipalities are representing their long-term best interests and those of the folks that live and work in the coastal zone. So, thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Mr. Lomax, thank you for good information, a lot of information, actually. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Lomax? If you raise your hand, sir, we'll give you the microphone. We ask you state your name and address for the record, that's all.
Jack Carini, 222 Spruce in Villas. The question I have is, this regime that's in now in the state of New Jersey has one way of thinking. If the new regime that comes in at election time decides to swap and put this on aside, what happens to all this information?
So it's a good question. And it depends what happens with the timeline of these rules, right? So these rules are being proposed. They would have to be adopted. If they are adopted before a change in administration, the rules are adopted, then there would have to be a new rule adoption or a repeal of the existing regulations.
Okay, but it can be changed if someone at the hierarchy, a governor or what have you, comes in and brings them in to say, listen, I don't believe in climate change, because there are people that do that. One side or the other. Is all of this possibly a moot point, or is it something that cannot be ever changed once it's a rule?
It's interesting. I would say that rules can always be changed.
Okay.
It's unusual that existing regulations get changed dramatically. Typically what happens is an existing rule isn't completely disbanded, but it gets modified over time. The other way that rules change is that they are adjudicated in the courts, and the courts take a position on whether the rule itself follows the guidelines. So all regulations are to flow from existing laws, right? The laws establish the requirements, and the regulations are then promulgated to back up those requirements and implement them to the regulated public. So I think there are a couple different ways that changes could occur.
I was just wondering that, because in our area, some areas are considered not flood zones, and some are, and it can only be a block away. There's been a lot of development down here, without a doubt, and it's booming in this area, in the villas. And there's questionable areas that say, well, you're not in a flood zone. And then, as you're predicting here, or not you, but the study predicting that we're going to be up 5 or 10 feet above flood stage, what are the homes that are being built now going to look like in the future? I mean, what's going to happen to those neighborhoods?
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because as soon as you start to change the elevation of homes, if they have to be built to a higher base flood elevation, you start to run up against the ceiling cap, the building height cap that you have in your zoning. And then, so the question is, okay, does zoning then change? And then the first house that builds to the new elevation for flood hazard and to whatever the new building height is that's adjusted accordingly becomes the visual impediment, right? And so all the homes behind that, then the question is, okay, if those were water view homes before that and now have lost their water view after this new home has been built, does that then start to impact the ratables of the town? So,
Sure.
I think you've touched on one of the issues that is least understood about this proposed regulation, and that is, what are the economic impacts of something as substantial as this?
I agree.
When you think about land use regulation in the state of New Jersey, unfortunately, it happens in silos based on the various roles of government. And so DEP, in this regard, is looking at trying to adjust its regulations to climate change and sea level rise. At the same time, you have other elements of the Department of State and the Office of Planning Advocacy looking at how do we create zones of development or centers of development, right? And so various municipalities go through a process where they designate centers, and those centers are where increased density is supposed to go. Municipalities that have done that over time now have those centers being reduced in size, also by way of anticipated flood hazard changes. So you have increased regulation, you have shrinking areas for development, and then at the same time, we have increased standards for affordable housing, where affordable housing obligations on municipalities are starting to be to come to the fore. And the question is, well, where do you achieve that affordable housing development if your flood zones have impacted your developable areas and your centers are being squeezed and you're supposed to be building more affordable units? How does all of this fit? And as I said, you've touched on really two things. One is, where is the intersection of regulation in New Jersey, and how do we take these disparate regulations and pull them together and start to develop a cohesive plan forward for living and working in New Jersey, particularly in the coastal zone? And then at the same time, what are the economic impacts associated with that, and how are those impacts translated and transferred to the regulated public? How is that transferred to the obligation of municipalities, and what role does the state have in entering into that realm and providing funding assistance to meet these challenges?
Has any engineer thought about a way to divert any type of flooding? You come up with these regulations, but is there any kind of study for engineering saying, okay, we've got Lower Township, what can we do that if there is a flood to divert it away from all the real estate that's paying the taxes to pay all these bills that we have in this township? If you have a flood and wipe out half the shoreline and all the houses, pretty soon you just got land you're paying taxes on, and that doesn't help the township. I'm looking at long-term being here because I built the house in 2020. I want to be here for 30 years. I don't want to see something impact to the point where people are not coming here anymore because they were afraid that 10 feet of flood stage, we don't have a plan to fight against that on an engineering level.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything put forward in a comprehensive manner that would address flooding at the level that you're talking about.
Teresa Stanton, 5 Linda Sue Lane. I would like to know, will you be providing the citizens of the town the evidence that you're using to come up with a prediction that sea levels are going to rise 5 feet, because that's an awful lot? So I would like to see evidence. It seems like, where did you come up with that number? That's my first question.
Okay.
And also, can we get this documentation online?
Yes, I believe this documentation will be made available to the public, both by the county and the municipality. But to your first question,
Yeah.
I did not come up with 5 feet of.
I'm sure you didn't, but I would like to see, as a homeowner and a business owner, I'd like to see evidence that that's like a real number and not like an Al Gore number, okay? Because we know what happened with him.
And I would say that is a public comment that is very appropriate to be making. All of these comments are appropriate to be making to the state, to have those addressed by the folks who are the ones defining what that sea level prediction, what level of sea level rise is being put into.
Right, so how can we get that information?
That information, once the rule is proposed, it's a good question. Will the municipality be providing a conduit for when the public hearings will occur?
Yes, once we find the date of the public hearing, we're going to actually post it on the website. We do a lot of our communication through Facebook page, Lower Township. It'll go in there also, so you'll know when it's coming. If you haven't heard nothing and you're concerned about it, you can always call the clerk's office and they'll give information on the public session.
Yeah, I think it's something that all the citizens of Lower Township probably all of Cape May should have.
Yes.
Because it's going to affect everyone's home. And it shouldn't be based on broad speculation. It should be based on very distinct facts. That's my opinion, and I'm sure others will share that opinion.
So the first graphic that I had up, which was the table with the,
Yeah, but it's a prediction. You said yourself.
Understood.
Prediction, high, low.
what I'm,
It's not a
what
certainty.
I'm trying to help you understand is that that has a source.
Right.
And that'll be made available to you. And if you Google that source, that'll start to take you into the science that was used to arrive at this elevation. I think that's a way, I think what you're looking at is you're interested in trying to get to what is the science that's being used, and that's the way that you do that.
Right, and okay, so I guess they'll also perhaps have trends, like how sea level has risen up to this time,
Yeah,
predict the future trend.
So this
thing.
is one chart out of the Rutgers STAP panel, or the STAP summary, and there's an entire report that is also with this. So if you search that, you'll get the report.
All right, so, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Deb Johns, 233 Woodland Avenue, Villas. How would individual homeowners know what zone they're in?
What flood zone? So that information is available online. I think you could probably also get that information from the zoning office here in the township.
Moving forward with this, where do we get that? The new inundated zone?
So these maps have been made available to the township. The township has these from my office.
So if homeowners call the township, give their address, they would be able to be told if they are or not in the inundated zone.
Yes, and if the zoning office needs the specific GIS layers that we're using in our maps, it's all public domain information. We'd be happy to supply that to the township for reference.
And
Debbie,
also-
real quick. This is the part that's scary. If you live on the west side of the village, you're in the zone.
I understand
The
that.
Bay Shore, it crosses Bay Shore and the northern end of the village. I'm looking at this going, this is ugly, this is worse than the FEMA maps.
Well, also, everybody's talking about building and additions and alterations and that. It's already starting to affect our insurance now. My neighbors were non-renewed because they live within 2,000 feet of water. 2,000 feet, they're being non-renewed. They applied for different companies for insurance, 3 times the cost they're paying now. And I am 2 houses from the bay. My insurance went up 25%. I really believe that when my renewal comes, they're going to non-renew me because the insurance companies are already looking at this in the state of
Yeah.
New Jersey.
I share
And
your concern because
That's going to put a lot of people in our town out of here because we're not going to be able to afford $5,000, $10,000. That's what the people in the Bay are paying now. Now we're talking about moving to from Bay Shore Road to the Bay. There's a lot of senior citizens, me being one, that's going to be cost prohibitive.
Yeah, so the flood hazard change impacts the township in 2 ways. As you've pointed out, it introduces new areas to flood hazard and the need to carry flood insurance where that was not the case before. The other thing that you touched on, and I appreciate you doing that, was that folks that are in existing flood zones that already pay for flood insurance will be looking at substantial changes in their rates based on the fact that they're now 5 feet deeper into the flood zone than they were previously. So,
And would they be able to make you bring your house up to the standard in order to get insurance? Like, would it be possible that if you have an existing home, you don't plan on doing any alterations to it, that in order to get insurance, you're going to have to bring your house up to the level? Is that possible?
it's a hard question to answer because I can't speak on behalf of the insurance companies. What I can say is DEP has taken the position that these rules will not force anyone to have to raise their homes to take an existing finished floor that ends up being below the new flood hazard area. You wouldn't have to raise your finished floor to be above that in DEP's world. How that then translates into the ability to insure that property or what the rates are. I can't speak to that. I don't know how the insurance companies will react to these rules, or whether they will then use that as an excuse to stop writing policies or
And again,
create
if you're
exclusion.
in this zone, if you decide to do any kind of alteration, whether it could be roof, siding, windows, doors,
No,
or
it
is it
doesn't-
substantial?
It has to be structural, so you
Struct-
can
okay.
change out windows and doors, and you can change your siding, and, you can re-roof, but you couldn't add an addition, you couldn't add a floor, you couldn't take an existing open-air patio and enclose that into a,
Okay.
year-round living space. Those would all be considered substantial changes.
Okay, thank you.
Hang on, sir, I think there's some other folks.
Michael Butler, 404 Hollywood Road, Villas. I'm personally flabbergasted that this has come this far, and it was initiated by an executive order. That's one of my, and more a comment to you guys. I think, Mr. Mayor and the council people, you guys, it's a 5-alarm fire. You guys have to really, really initiate some notification, some way of notifying the people of this county that this is about to hit, because it's just, I can't believe what I'm hearing, really. I mean, it's complete speculation. I did a little research on the people from Rutgers that wrote these regulations and predictions, and their business is climate change, and that's how they make their living. I mean, they're all in, and, that's complete, understandable. They're academia, and that's their line of study, but they're altering an entire county's economy based on their prediction. To me, it's unbelievable, really. It's like a movie. And I think you guys are really responsible for really organizing the residents of this community to fight this, however we can. I can't believe the dates either. I mean, it seems like we're right on it. We're right on top of it. It's shocking. Did you want to say something?
This is the first step of that, what you're saying. This is why we have this public meeting, and we're getting this out to you, and trying to get all the information out. This is the first step.
I really appreciate that, your comments, and I especially appreciate your clarity on what you presented.
Thank you. I will say, just so that you know, there was a mayor's roundtable a couple of weeks ago where this information was presented to mayors and administrators. Your municipality was the first to have me present. They jumped on the ball immediately. So to the extent that I can reassure you that your governing body is taking this seriously, this is the first presentation. I have many more to do, but they were the ones that the mayor and your administrator said, we need you here immediately.
Yes, sir. Like Mr. Lomax said, I was maybe 2 weeks ago, we had the presentation, and then the very following day, I asked the clerk to reach out for Mr. Lomax to energize the residents of Lower Township, get you guys to come out and hear this, talk about it. We're going to advertise and advertise and advertise and push and push and push, because we're dead against this. It's going to change the whole landscape of Lower Township.
Yeah, I mean, there won't be residents and I don't understand how they just said, they just arbitrarily picked that number, 100 years, 2100, the year 2100, there's no incremental, and there doesn't seem to be any economic studies. I'm sorry.
My question is, Rutgers made this, I'm Jeannie Butler from 404 Hollywood Road in the Villas. So all these rules have been made or are being made, a 1,000-page report
Being proposed.
being proposed on predictions made from Rutgers. Is that correct?
The panel was convened by Rutgers. It's a panel of scientists from various, not just from Rutgers, from various locations and institutions.
So my question is, are there more predictions from other people and other places, scientists like Rutgers? Like, all this is being changed and it's affecting us over one basically, what I'm looking at is one study, one line of thinking. Is there opposing views? Is there other information? And all these rules and changes are being made from this. I don't,
So yes, there are lots of other studies that address climate change and sea level rise. I think the reason, and I don't want to, this is conjecture, so I want to preface it by saying that. I think DEP is relying on this particular study because it is based on New Jersey conditions, not a generic study about sea level rise and climate change, from some other geographic area. So this is the one that DEP chose to focus on because of it being a local state university and based on evaluations of this particular state's sea level rise and predicted precipitation patterns and increased coastal storm events and that sort of thing.
Hi, I've lived here 25 years, and if you walk along the bay, anybody can see that there has been a definite decrease in the land from the water to the houses. It's obvious. So we know that erosion, or whatever we want to call it, is taking place. I'm not going to even use climate change as the basis. You see the barrier islands and the problems that they're having trying to maintain a beach. So I understand what we're talking about. But the impact to our community, which for the most part are working class people, financially, it's going to devastate this township. Because the majority of the people that live here are not people of means, for lack of a better word. We're just regular people who plans on staying here for our life, and just the flood insurance and the homeowner's insurance alone, add the taxes into that with the skyrocketing cost of living here, it's going to be really detrimental to the people that live here. And I'd like to focus on what we can do from that aspect rather than disputing the science. I don't really care about the science. I care about the people and what we have to do to ensure that we're going to still have our life here. Not 70 years from now, 10 years from now, because if this gets approved, it's going to affect building. It's going to affect people's lives far from 2100. It's going to be effective. The day that becomes effective, it will affect this entire township. I worked in the construction office, and a 5-foot increase in building height is a big deal. A big deal.
If you know, how is this going to affect, right now, almost every community in Cape May County is in a flood mitigation program. You do flood mitigation projects to mitigate flooding, and then you get a break on your insurance. Right now, Lower Township is a Class 7 community. It's a 15% discount if you're in a flood zone on
Talking
your,
about the CRS ratings.
yeah, CRS. So to me, it just seems like these guys just threw their hands up and said, forget flood mitigation, we're just going to raise your insurance.
So that does beg an important question, right? Municipalities have been spending considerable amounts of money, and there's been a lot of investment in flood mitigation and how to address sea level rise. This moves that needle substantially, and projects that have been designed to a certain standard, in essence, become obsolete because of this broad brush change to 5 feet. So it's an important point, and I think it goes back to one of the primary elements of concern that the county has raised, and there's a draft resolution that the county's working on, and I think a copy of that's been provided to the municipality as well. But the cause for concern is, what about looking at this from an incremental standpoint? Like, how can we move the needle incrementally over time and be checking the science to correspond
Rather
with
than
that?
jumping ahead 7-6 years based on a
Go.
prediction.
And at the same time, doing a full economic impact analysis. So if we think back to the types of regulatory benchmarks that projects have to go through to, when they're trying to get permitted, there's a comprehensive environmental analysis, and larger projects go through, at the federal level, they go through a NEPA process, National Environmental Policy Act. And one of the primary components of that is a full economic impact analysis of what those new regulations, or excuse me, an economic impact analysis of what a project would bring to a particular area. And in this case, I think what the county and the municipality are concerned with is, where is the economic impact study that has addressed how the state is going to, how the state will mobilize resources and address the economic impacts that occur as a result of these rules, because it disproportionately impacts the coastal zone, particularly Cape May County, which is virtually surrounded by water. I mean, we're a peninsula, but let's not kid ourselves. Most of that peninsula at the northern end and along the way is a series of tidal wetlands and stream corridors that come in and virtually make Cape May County an island.
I have one additional question. In the last 10 years, how many houses have we lost due to a flood in the last 10 years in Lower Township?
I don't have that exact number.
Have we lost one?
As far as a flood?
Yeah, flood taking a house out?
I don't want to give you bad information.
Okay.
I think there was someone right behind you.
My name's Jennifer Lennox. I live at 215 Spruce Avenue. And I know this is going to be a little bit unpopular, and I have a science degree in coastal geomorphology. Like, I kind of understand the science, and we have to do predictions. And I think this is way overreaching. I agree with the incremental approach. I think this is too broad, and I think it's too severe. I don't think it's going to make it through DEP process. Based on all the comments that will be received, they will have to come back and modify it, maybe. But my other point that is maybe controversial is, we don't want to become like Ocean City. Like, I'm concerned about over density and overpopulation like DEP is, and this was meant to discourage overdevelopment. And then places like Ocean City, where they're doing triplexes and the density is incredible. I think we have to keep that in check. So I kind of see a little bit of that side too, from where they're coming from. But I don't have a question. That's just my comment. I don't think that with all the public comment that's going to, as long as it's broadcast and people know about it, I don't know how it's going to pass.
Yeah, so I appreciate your input on that. And the one thing that I would offer is that Lower Township cannot become an Ocean City or a Wildwood, just by virtue of the existing regulations and the existing zoning that you have. So just keep in mind that regardless of this rule, you have the coastal zone management rules, which is CAFRA, waterfront development, and coastal wetlands. So all three of those resources are protected by the coastal zone management rules. You have the Freshwater Wetlands Protection Act rules, which came in 1987. Those protect all of your freshwater wetlands and establish buffers to those wetlands. In addition to that, you have the Flood Hazard Area Control Act rules that came in 2007. Those protect your waterways and the riparian zones adjacent to those waterways. And then you have your stormwater rules, which have been revised over time to require, to limit impervious cover and to provide the ability to recharge, to collect and retain runoff on site and to recharge those waters on site. And then you have a whole series of other rules that, especially at your local level, which is zoning, which backs into the type of density. So, and once you get into the CAFRA rules, you have to address things like tree preservation, right? So there's required amounts of tree preservation. There's limitations on impervious cover. So the other benefit that you have in Lower Township and in large sections of the the mainland municipalities is massive amounts of land, thousands and thousands of acres that are already protected through various open space preservation programs, whether it's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Cape May National Wildlife Refuge, whether it's Green Acres protected lands, the Cape May County Open Space Program. So there are thousands and thousands of acres that are protected. Most of the farms, or a significant number of the farms in Cape May County, are protected through farmland preservation. So I know folks get concerned that we'll see a massive build-out of the mainland, and that just is not the case because of the amount of existing protections that have occurred over time. And what we end up with is this composite, this mosaic of protections that is one layered on top of the other. And the question is, well, where does that layering end, right? Because, yes, it's important to make sure that we don't build in high-risk flood zones where we know that we're going to have buildings lost to severe coastal storms or sea level rise. But we also have to account for the fact that we have significant amounts of land that will never be developed. And in order to live and work and to enjoy the ability to stay in Cape May County, we have to have at least areas that can be developed where density can, increased density can occur, development can therefore coexist with the natural environment.
I didn't mean to imply that I thought we were going to do like Ocean City. I just was saying that that's where their viewpoint is coming from because of over-density.
I think oftentimes, I don't want to be on my soapbox too much, but I think it's important when you're writing regulations that you get out and see the communities and the areas that are being impacted, right? So it's easy to have a certain impression of what a geographic area is or you think it looks like if you're in Trenton, right? Or if you're making a decision in the northern part of the state about the southern part of the state. So I think we all have to get out of our comfort zone or our confined space and go to the area that's going to be regulated and see what that community consists of. And we see this not just in flood hazard regulation, but we even see it in the way that that the state has tried to mandate certain types of zoning for municipalities or establishing centers for redevelopment, where something that works great in Monmouth County doesn't really translate to an agrarian. We're a post-agrarian, new tourism-based society, and our roads infrastructure and our towns were developed in a way that are completely inconsistent with the way that the suburbs were built, where a lot of these planning concepts are derived from. So I appreciate your comments. It makes sense to understand the community that you're regulating.
Hi, Donna Boyle, 80 Millman Lane. I am on the bay. We have a house there. My question is, we have a building project that was approved by the township and also CAFRA through, up to 2028. I'm wondering how anything that's already permitted will be affected by something like this.
You're grandfathered by your current permitting. They call it legacy now. That's the term of art that DEP is using. It's a legacy project that will be protected from the new regulations. So, however, it brings me to a comment that someone else made earlier, which is, how will the insurance companies react to that? I can't tell you that. I can tell you that DEP will not make it impossible for you to perfect your current permits as they were issued, but how the insurance companies will relate to your property and insure it into the future, I don't know what that will be.
And Kyle Loveland, also 80 Millman Lane. For these new proposals, what would this look like in terms of public infrastructure? I mean, like, what do new road projects look like if this is the predicted flooding levels? And then a second question is, in terms of the data here, I see that this study was, or this report was done in 2019. Have the models been updated based on the last 4.5 years of data? Are there any changes in what these percentages look like based on new information?
Okay, so your first part of your question was about infrastructure. Second part was about updating the models. Let me take it in reverse order. DEP contends that they're using the best available science to issue these rules. That there is a rule writing and the adoption of regulation happens at a glacial pace, right? So my guess is this may have been the best available science at the time that they were trying to concentrate on developing these rules. I'm not aware of whether the Rutgers panel has done any kind of an update since 2019. There is some anecdotal discussion in the community right now, and I'm sure, excuse me, I'm sure we'll see that in some of the comments that come out where one of the authors of the study that this is based on has modified their predictions to some extent. So is this the best available science now? I can't tell you that. And I think we'll see that tested through this commenting process. The first part of your question, which is infrastructure, roads, bridges, all infrastructure, all new development is going to be required to meet these same challenges. So there are some practical considerations of how do we take roads and make them 5 feet or even more than 5 feet higher than they are now, right? Because we have roads that are well below the flood hazard elevation, and how do we then take them and put them a foot above the future flood hazard elevation? I don't know how you achieve that. I think that's probably the starting point, and one of the comments, I believe, that is also in the draft resolution, which is, shouldn't we collectively, the state, be looking at how to address this infrastructure concern? Because in the event of a significant coastal storm event, folks will need to leave Cape May County. I think we all understand that. We saw that during Hurricane Sandy and some of the other storms that occurred just before and just after that. But we need roadways to be of sufficient width and sufficient height to be able to move folks out of the area, because we're smart enough, most of us are smart enough to leave when significant storm events occur. And that's really, to me, a logical starting point, is making sure that our infrastructure is up to par to address sea level rise and the threat of future storm events.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lomax, I want to thank you for coming out. Great presentation. I want to thank the residents of Lower Township for coming out. You care, we care. We're going to push hard, get information out there. If you can help us out and talk through your neighbors and your friends and your family, I appreciate that. But there's some work here to be done, and once we receive the information on the public comment period, we'll get the information out, Facebook, our website. We'll push hard to get information out, though.
All right, can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
You're here, all your questions. As soon as the comment period starts, you have to write letters. We have to contact the DEP. But don't stop there, because the social economic questions, the questions about the insurance and all that stuff, hit the governor's office and anybody else you can. Don't stop at the DEP. We have to get this answered from many questions, and the DEP is focused on their way of looking at things. We have to hit every aspect to protect us.
Yes.
Would it be possible for you to address this situation in your monthly?
Call. I'm going to, beginning of August.
That's probably, more people get that, and not everybody looks on Facebook. And I think if they hear you read what you wrote on Facebook, there would have been more people here.
Okay, I'll make sure it goes out. That was my plan. The first couple of days of August, I'll go out. And once we find out the contacts, you can respond to comments, not just the DEP. Councilman Conrad said, the governor's office. We'll find some contacts out there, phone numbers, address, whatever we can to make your comments better. We'll make sure we get the information out there.
And remember, I know some people asked me beforehand about getting more information about this meeting out. 2 weeks ago is when the mayor found out about it, and we actually are having a public meeting already. For government, that's pretty good.
Anybody else on council want to comment?
I know how everyone feels. I live, Coxall Creek is my backyard, so it's going to be major impact for me. And luckily, right now, I don't need the flood insurance. I never had a problem. Been there well over 40 years, and we've never had a problem. And I can see this is going to be not just my area, but the whole entire township is major impact. And I do believe that our assemblymen, Eric Simonson and Antoine McCullen, are definitely in our house here, so they know, and they're going to be supporting us to go forward with trying to change this from happening, for sure.
Mayor, if I
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Leffy.
could, Mayor, to Deb's point, we have that newsletter that goes out too that we post, and I know Councilman Coombs did his piece for this next one, and I can add all this information on the manager's report, too. And we could probably get that stuff out through Chamber of Commerce as well and try and really put the word out to everybody to keep your eye on this.
Maybe we could do a Zoom meeting if necessary for people who can't make it down here, where we want to let them know it's going to be.
We'll do what we can, for sure.
And I think Ron can answer this, too. I know the county does a quarterly newsletter as well that will probably go out soon. I think they just started that, if I'm not mistaken. And they're going to spearhead this, and we're just helping to help guide the ship a little bit with every other municipality in Cape May County.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Mayor.
Pete.
Appreciate your proactiveness on
All right, well, thank you for coming out. It means a lot to us.
it. You bet.
Okay.
Take care.
We'll take a 2-minute recess so we can empty the room out unless you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, which you may want to not want to stay for the rest of the meeting. Okay, if you want to stay for the meeting, we have a public portion, you can talk about that, okay? Just hang out for a little bit, okay?
Thank you for having me tonight on your agenda. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to come out and talk to you a little bit about what your JIF is doing. Given the time constraint, I'm going to kind of jump around in my presentation. You have a copy of the packet in front of you. If you go to page 2, I talk a little bit about the challenges. We're seeing a hardening reinsurance market, and you kind of heard a little bit from the public earlier about how they're facing non-renewals from the insurance market and higher premiums. Well, that's not only impacting the commercial market, it's also impacting the JIF. So we're seeing higher premiums for less coverage. We're also being faced with medical inflation costs, as well as some regulatory and statutory changes. The governor decided to make COVID-19 compensable. So this is money that we did not budget for to pay for claims. The ACM JIF alone paid over $2.5 million on COVID claims since 2020. We're also being faced with reopeners. As you can see, the ACM JIF is looking at almost $27 million of reopener claims costs that we were able to identify. And at a recent seminar that I sat through at, there was a judge that presented and that works in the work comp courts, and she's noted that there were over 40,000 workers' compensation reopener claims in the docket. So that's very significant. We're also being faced with pension offset costs. Again, this came out of the comptroller's office, this change, and as you can see, it's costing the ACM JIF about $5 million. If you jump over to page 8 of the presentation, I just want to remind you that your JIF is very strong financially. We have over $13 million in surplus, over $46 million in cash in hand. We've done a dividend release to our members in excess of $53 million, and Lower Township alone has received $2.2 million from the JIF in dividends. And then jumping over to page 10, I just want to highlight some of the programs that are offered by the JIF. We offer safety and risk management training and resources. Some of these trainings are required by OSHA, the courts, the federal and state government. We just provide a channel for you to complete them and for your employees to complete the training at and inclusive of your membership. So there's no additional cost for you to go out and get the separate training as Lower Township by yourself. We do it on a MEL basis, so we have over 17 joint insurance funds that are part of the MEL system, and we provide training to everyone. So it gives you the training at a reduced cost. The Atlantic JIF also joined the environmental JIF this year. So now you have access to environmental questions and helplines and coverages. We also have EP on POL risk management program. If you find yourself in a situation where you have an employment-related matter, we ask that you call the helpline for guidance before taking any action. It will help reduce your claims. We also have we're also a member of the Cyber GIF. As I heard earlier, we have our cyber training that was released July 8th. We ask that you complete it. It is very important. It's part of the requirement of our cyber GIF framework. We also have a good handle on our claims management. And finally, our GIF is unique because it is member-driven. Ms. Fournier is your fund commissioner, and she's also an active member of our safety committee. She can attest that all the decisions that are made at our GIF are made at the subcommittee level, and then there are recommendations to the executive committee for final approval. So our office does not do any of that. It is strictly the members that make all the decisions as to how the GIF is going to proceed going forward, whether it's financial or programs or resources available to the membership. That is all I'm going to cover for tonight. There is another packet in front of you. It's just a quick snapshot of how we did in 2023 financially, as well as additional information about Lower Township and how you are compared to your members, how well you're doing compared to your members. I hope that you will look favorably upon renewing your membership with the fund. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
I just want to thank you for your presentation. I know you kind of went through it kind of fast, but all the information in front of us, we'll make sure we go through it all.
All right, thank you.
Any council members want to add anything?
No.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we'll move down to the consent agenda. Anybody in council want to comment on the consent agenda? Anybody from the public want to comment on anything on the consent agenda only? I'll close the public portion.
Approval of the minutes, July 1, 2024. Resolutions 2024-232 through 2024-246. Ordinance 2024-09, an ordinance amending Chapter 600, towing and storage, area requirements, specifically subsection 6A1, towing and storage fees of the Code of the Township of Lower, and ordinance 2024-10, an ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 523, rental properties of the Code of the Township of Lower, in order to provide lead-based paint inspections of certain rental properties and to enact inspection fees in compliance with Public Law 2021, Chapter 182. This is the first reading of ordinance 2024-09 and 2024-10. The second reading and public hearing have been scheduled for August 5th, 2024.
Thank you. Is there a motion to move forward?
Make a motion.
Second motion.
Councilmember
Ye-
Conrad?
Yes.
Councilmember Coombs?
Yes.
Councilmember Roy?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Perry?
Yes.
Mayor Sipp.
Yes. Okay, this time we'll go to the public comment portion of the meeting. So anybody from the public want to come up to the microphone and comment to council, you're more than welcome.
My name is Sharon Snyder. I'm at 716 West Rio Grande Avenue. This morning I went to the zoning officer and to a question about Lot 12 at Block 618 that's for sale. And the picture that they gave us, it has my property for sale. And I asked them, I said, what are you going to do? And they told me, this is what's for sale, and they gave me this picture.
Okay, I don't know what they gave you. I can't see from here.
I have
but-
copies here if you would like to look at it.
Well, I'd like you to do, if you can, give it to the manager, Mr. Laffey, and work this. I don't know if it's a mistake on zoning's end.
Yes, on zoning, and it was supposed to go up for auction on this Friday.
Okay, we'll look into it. The solicitor will look into it because he drafted the resolution to advertise these lots.
Mayor, we can look into that. The property that's for sale is a vacant lot, which has been confirmed to be owned by the township. It's not this individual's property. There was a foreclosure, I believe, which resulted in the township obtaining ownership of this property several years ago. That has been confirmed also with the tax assessor and tax collector's office, but we can certainly take a look at what she's provided here today and ensure 100% that this is owned by Lower Township. We've done that. We've done our due diligence, but we'll do it again.
Okay, and I've seen the lot myself. I've been out there. There's no house on the lot, just a vacant lot.
They own lot,
Well, just hold up, sir. We'll finish up here, and you have the opportunity to come up, okay?
Mayor, they own lot 13 and 14. This is lot 12.
Yes, we do own lot 13 and 14. And it's lot 12 that's for sale. But when we were there today, what they have marked off, I was questioning what exactly is for sale on that lot 12. When I went there today, they have my parking lot next to my house, which I've been paying taxes on.
No. She met with the assessor today.
Yeah.
And the assessor explained to her that she owns lot 13 and 14. They've never consolidated the lots, so she's paying one tax bill for lot 13 and one tax bill for lot 14. We are selling lot 12. If she is parking on lot 12, she's parking on township property. Your lots are 13 and 14.
Yeah, and I was also told to be advised to get a survey on the property, which I do have that in process. So I would like to see if you could hold off on that auction on Friday, because whoever's going to buy that is going to have a big surprise on the property, because we even measured it out this afternoon, my husband and myself, and it matches up with our, this paper here. I believe I gave you that. Yes.
Yeah, you have 13 and 14 highlighted. Lot 12 is references Lower Township exempt. And this is the tax map that you gave.
Yes, that's a tax map. So I do have that, and I am in the process, but I am asking you if you could hold on that auction on Friday so we could get a survey. I did contact a surveyor that I know, and he is working on this for us.
So ma'am, who's the survey that you retain? Survey, and the survey is only going to show the dimensions of the property. It's not going to discuss ownership whatsoever. You may want to speak to the clerk's office. I believe there is some documentation relative to the foreclosure of Lot 12, which ultimately resulted in that specific parcel and only that parcel
Yeah.
being transferred into the township's possession.
Yeah.
It
And
has nothing to do with 13 and 14, though.
No, I understand that. We're not for sale, which
Yeah, no.
is a good thing. I
We're
live
not selling
there.
your property.
I live there, and I park there. So it's like, I want to make sure whoever's going to bid on this, that they have the right in mind, that they know what they're going to get. So I believe I did ask for a phone call. I'll call you tomorrow.
I think I have your number on my desk.
Okay,
I met
yeah.
with the assessor, I met with the tax collector, we put a phone call in to the solicitor. We're looking at it all, and everything that we can see on township records, you own a 13 and 14, Lower Township owns 12. Are there cars parked on lot 12? Absolutely. Their cars are parked on township property.
Okay, that's,
Yes.
Well, that's what we got to find out with our survey. I want to know, did they go out there and measure it? I mean, that's my big question.
okay, the solicitor will look into it. He'll look
Okay.
into tomorrow. We'll get back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
That's my name and number.
Okay.
Hello, my name's Jody Mavroff. I live 716 West Old Rio Grande. This is also in regards to Block 816, Lot 12. We were made aware of the public auction coming up on Friday, and there is, we have a petition from different neighbors on the street trying to request the reconsideration of putting this up for lot. There is lots of wildlife that live there. It's haven't been built since 1988 is when the township took that plot over, and we just hope our request is considered. Can I submit this to someone?
Mr. Laff, he'll take it from you. Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Raymond Wolf. I live at 718 West Rio Grande Avenue, house right next to the empty lot. I mean, the township's aware of the house, the lot is wetlands, right? So you're saying they can build on wetlands, or?
We're not
Since you're
making-
selling it.
We're not making any representations.
I mean, it has
Sir,
never
I'm
been a
trying to
house
answer
as
your
long
question.
as I can remember.
I'm trying to answer your question. In
Well,
our-
I'm saying,
Okay.
my question, I don't mean to sound like, why, my question is, why would somebody pay that kind of money if you can never build on it?
So we are making no representations as terms of whether or not the lot conforms with applicable zoning. It's a due diligence period that a buyer would have to do if they purchase that lot at an auction.
Yeah, because like I said, it is wetlands, and the tide covers it twice a day, every day. I was just wondering, because, and there's no parking on the street, everybody's fighting with parking anyway, because no one parks on the lot, there's all trees there. They park in front of the lot, on the street, there's nobody on the lot. So.
Okay.
The street is bad enough where people are fighting, they block the fire hydrants, they call the cops don't want to be bothered coming down, I mean, so I just. You got a picture of the trees there? Yeah.
It's not
Yeah, it's
really
all
relevant.
trees there.
for my
Believe me,
consideration.
I lived on the street a long time, it's always been an empty lot.
And if it's buildable, whether it's buildable or not, it's up for auction. I
But
mean,
the
obviously-
township's we were just wondering if the township would hold off until we maybe iron some things out.
So that's not my call to make.
I
mean,
know,
obviously-
well, that's why I'm here in the meeting.
I'm trying to answer your question, sir. I heard your concerns, I heard the other woman's concerns as well. We are gonna do our due diligence in addition to the due diligence we've already done, and then council has to make a determination in terms
Okay,
of what to do.
well, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Come up to the microphone, ma'am, so we can, you're recorded, so we pick you up on the recording.
I understand, thank you. If I do, the lady said over there about, it's only a survey. If I do go ahead and go get the survey, will you honor that?
Well, the township still owns Lot 12.
Oh, yeah, I
The township
understand
has every
that.
right to sell parcels that it owns in its own individual.
I totally understand that, but if I show you where, if my survey, if I come here and say, this is what my surveyor said, will you honor that?
No, they'll probably have the township engineer evaluate any documentation that you provide, and
Okay.
then they'll do their own due diligence as well.
Okay, because I'm paying taxes on that, so,
You're not paying the taxes on Lot 12.
oh, no, I don't have no, but according to that picture,
So I wouldn't, this is something from the. It's like a GIS photo that's provided by the county. This does not accurately depict the dimensions of that parcel, in my opinion. This is like a mapping service that the county uses. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a planner, I'm not a surveyor, but I've seen these things in my tenure as zoning and planning board solicitors throughout Cape May County. You can't go off of this photo alone. There will be a legal description, there'll be a survey, well, not a survey, there'll be a legal description that's set forth in the deed that's recorded with the county, and that oftentimes is what sets forth the dimensions of that lot. They're very confusing if you're not familiar with them. 121 feet, 60 minutes, 32 seconds east to a point, and it basically traces out so a surveyor can walk those dimensions and determine the actual dimensions of the lot.
yeah, because I know on the one picture, it had a line going down the middle of my house. Not on that picture there, but on another picture that they gave me, a line was going right down the middle of my house.
So that's not the tax map. That's an aerial photograph that's maintained by
Yeah.
the GIS.
The other one's a tax map.
Correct,
And that's what I own, is
tax map.
13 and 14.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you now. Yes.
Deb Johns, 233 Woodland Avenue, and I'd like to address this to Tom. We spoke before the meeting, but I would like to know if any of the council can give us an update on when the outfall pipes on Woodland Avenue are going to be extended.
I'll give you the same answer I had earlier. I wish Will was here from de Blasio's office. We are waiting for the DEP. We do have a date now?
I don't have a date. What I did, they revoked our application, and we resubmitted that with positive results. We added 4 different outfalls to that same permit. So it's still in the works to get approved. I'll try and give you a shout as soon as I find that out.
And Woodland's one of the streets.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yes.
It's one of the streets.
Thank you.
We've been asking that question for a bit now.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bill Greenfield, Villas. Yeah, I don't know any of these people. I don't know what that property looks like, but Mr. Lomax was saying about the open space program earlier. I don't know when the last time the county's actually purchased. I mean, this sounds like it would be ideal for the open space program. If it's wetlands, inundated by water, just a suggestion, you know. You reach out to the county, see if they want to buy it for a reasonable price.
Okay.
If it's not buildable, you know. Okay?
Thank you now. Anybody else? Okay, I close the public portion. Any council comments? Deputy Mayor, anything?
Being as Mr. Heinley's here tonight, I'd like to see how he likes the newly paved Bay Drive.
Oh, boy, when you finally get around to it, it's great.
Anything else, Deputy? Councilman Roy?
No,
Councilman Coon?
No, nothing.
Councilman Conrad?
Real quick, leaving the concert the other night, not that we have a big crowd right now, which is a wonderful event. We then drove, my wife and I drove down Beach Road Drive just to watch. We checked out the sidewalk. People were using it. People were on the benches watching the sunset. I go to and from work, and I see people at the playgrounds and the parks, and this is what it's all for. But after tonight's meeting, that's kind of scary, really. The sidewalk and all that stuff may not mean anything to the DEP. And that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, I do not have anything. Is there a motion for a closed session?
Motion.
Second.
Councilmember Conrad?
Yes.
Councilmember Coombs?
Yes.
Councilmember Roy?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Perry?
Yes.
Mayor Sip? Yes.